All right, everybody. Thank you for being here. I am Jen Johnson, and this is,
Ben Leffler.
and you are watching Thought by Thought Healing. And today we are going to talk about one of our very favorite subjects in mind body medicine because it's so important. And we thought we'd just both start with just a couple sentences explaining what we're talking about, and so you can get a good glimpse into what we're going to spend the next little bit of time unpacking. So, Jen, you want to start? What do you feel like we are talking about today?
Well, definitely understanding that expectations and self-protection, expecting ourselves to protect ourselves can lead to all kinds of symptoms. And we really just want to make that clear, open it up so that you can see maybe how things are happening in your own life.
Yeah, I agree. I think when I first started my healing journey, I learned a lot about predictive coding and how the brain really can create your experience of this moment kind of based on your past memories and what you assume is going to come out of whatever you are walking into. And what I didn't learn in the beginning was that this applies to more than just pain and symptoms. It applies to other areas that we're going to talk about. And I think the categories that we're going to jump into is, yes, your expectations of sensations or pain or symptoms, whatever you're experiencing. And also, we're going to talk about how we expect and predict people around us are thinking and feeling about who we are as people. We're going to talk about our expectations around the need for certainty or knowing or surety in life. And then finally, and last but not least, we are going to, which I forget what it is currently. Oh, we're going to talk about our expectations around self. And so all these categories lead us into self-protection from pain, self-protection from people around us, from uncertainty, and self-protection, even from ourselves. And so that's what we're going to get into. Okay. Let's see, where should we start? Jen, do you want to just talk about a little bit how you ended up discovering kind of that this predictive coding that we're talking about, how it was so important for your healing journey?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think we should just make a connection between self-protection and what does that do to the body?
Yeah.
Because it seems like a good thing, right? To protect ourselves seems like the right thing to do. It seems smart. But at the same
Mhm.
time, what happens in our brain is that it puts us in this threat detection mode where we're continually taking in input and wondering, is that safe? Am I safe? And when we do that, then we are also inviting the symptoms to, kind of reign in our bodies. And so
Yeah.
if we can shine a light on that, I think that would really help.
Yeah. When we are self-protecting, we are definitely bracing our bodies, literally. And with tension myositis syndrome, we're talking about tension in the body. So
Right.
if we feel like something is dangerous or needs protecting, we're gonna set up our bodies to be able to keep us safe and to keep the quote unquote enemy or the danger away from us. And by doing that, we're putting ourselves in threat physiology at all times. Yeah,
Right.
which is
Right.
the very essence of the problem that we're dealing with TMS.
Exactly. Exactly. So maybe I can start out with just the experience of pain, because that's typically why our listeners are here.
Yeah.
Um, but also other symptoms. It can be stomach issues, it can be headaches. There are so many symptoms that can be triggered by the brain. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, so I used to wake up in pain, and so I think I expected and directed my day based on the fact that I needed to protect myself from that pain. So that was the first big change in my life when it came to expectations. Is just I don't expect pain anymore. And if I do have pain, I expect that I know how to walk through it. And that has been huge.
Yeah. It's even now, years later, it's still stunning to me that
Mhm.
our expectation of pain to be reoccurrent actually creates that very sensation in our bodies.
Right.
I had a kind of an interesting experience maybe a couple months ago this summer. And if you've been listening to me for very long, you know that bees are a problem for me.
Mhm.
I do not like bees. I am scared of bees. But I had gone out to dinner with some girlfriends and we were sitting in this corner booth, and one of the girls, I looked across the table and she had a bee kind of in her sweater, like crawling around in the folds of her sweater. And I could see it and was like, oh my goodness, like somebody take care of the bee. And so somebody took her sweater and went outside and shook the bee off and came back inside. And she put her sweatshirt back on. And maybe 5 minutes later, she, I looked over and she had another bee in another fold of her shirt.
Oh my
And,
goodness.
and I'm trying to stay in control and to not freak out, but I don't like bees. And she has two bees. And somebody went and took her sweater out again and brought it back in. And a few minutes later, I felt a bee crawling up my leg. I experienced a bee crawling up my leg, and I looked under the table, fully expecting to find a bee on my leg, and there was no bee on my leg.
Oh, for goodness sake. Ah,
And it happened again, probably 10 minutes later. And it was because my brain was expecting, because we had looked around the booth to see, is there a bee's nest or what is happening? Is it under the table? And so my brain had literally created a sensation of a bee twice crawling up my leg, and there was no bee. So I thought,
wow.
like when that happened, I thought, this is a great example of predictive coding. I have this experience now. I also don't like bees, so I'm afraid of them. And
Right.
before I knew it, I was experiencing this. So I just think that's a good example of predictive coding.
Right. Right. And how we can expect what we see or what we're even, you hear a buzz and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep. You feel
interesting.
it.
Very interesting.
Okay. So that is, yeah. So that's the first category, is this idea of breaking this cycle that your brain is predicting, you and your subconscious brain are predicting and expecting pain. So this feels like a good time also to unpack the old model of what we used to think that the brain did versus what we now know with neuroscience. And that is that the old model was that the brain would take sensory input from our receptors all over our body. The brain would process it and we would react according to that. But now we know that the brain is, yes, it is taking information through our sensory system up to our brain, but our brain is predicting what it thinks we're going to experience, and what, based on our past, the memory part of our brain, it is connected to that part of our brain and is comparing what has happened to us in the past in these types of situations and
Mhm.
creating an experience that matches that expectation or that prediction. So now the new model with this neuroscience really is showing this different way that the brain functions, which is why this work is so important, because our brains, like you're talking about, can get in these habits of producing symptoms, whether that's anxiety or depression or chronic pain or chronic fatigue, all these symptoms you were just mentioning. And so we're getting in there and interrupting this cyclical experience we're having, that the brain is basically supporting and saying, okay, Lord, I want to expect something different. I want to be in this moment instead of in my past, and say, what do you want from me now, here, and what is true in this moment versus the past. So thanks for letting me go on my little rant there. I'll hand it back to you. So pain was your first one. And then
Mhm.
where did you want to go from there?
Well, expectations of people around me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, people are people, and
Yeah.
there are going to be times that I disappoint them, and there are going to be times that they disappoint me. And what I learned is to let myself off the hook of trying to please everyone around me. It's just not possible, for one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it just puts our body into such a threat detection mode. Um, I can expect that God is going to heal those broken places in my heart, places where people have hurt me. And because of that, then I can walk in freedom and I can walk in a peace, that peace that surpasses all understanding, that guards our hearts and our minds in Christ Jesus. Philippians 4, 6, and 7. That is the kind of peace that we can expect.
Yeah. Yes. And you and I have done a lot of emotional work kind of around these expectations, I think. And I assume for you was similar to me when we started realizing, oh, I'm triggered by people and what they might think of me, their opinion of me. Then the work was not, for me, it wasn't immediately like, oh, well, I'm just not going to care what other people think. It really took me taking those overwhelmed parts of me and those scared parts of me and uh, and almost like allowing God to just love on those really fearful parts of my daily experience. Would you say the same?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And so once, to echo what you said, once I was able to hear what how the Lord wanted to protect my heart, I was also able to see that a lot of the expectations that I was putting upon people to judge me or to think poorly of me was based on maybe a pattern or a situation in my past. And now I was predicting and projecting that onto what I assumed other people were thinking or feeling about me.
Right.
And so allowing God to kind of redeem that expectation of other people is still a challenge for me. I don't know about you.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. It's super, it is tough to be able to step back and recognize what are the moments that I am actually feeling my past and allowing maybe like a label or a way that I felt about myself, a negative identity piece that I had picked up from something else, and am
Right.
carrying that into this relationship that I'm in now.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I guess while we're thinking of how does this manifest as pain, I'm just thinking this manifests as hypervigilance when I'm
Right.
around people. And I think I remember you mentioning once, or maybe you had written it somewhere, that um, you go into a scanning mode.
Face scanning.
Yes. Can you talk about the face scanning or the
Sure.
body
Um,
scanning?
yeah, I mean, and I didn't realize that it was a protective mode until, this work really.
Yeah.
But it's that idea that you are constantly looking at what are people's reactions to what I'm saying. Um, are they agreeing with me? Am I upsetting them? There was just this constant kind of like trying to guess what was going on in people's heads. And honestly, we're not mind readers.
Yeah.
People they could be thinking something totally different than what I'm assuming.
Yeah.
But I found that that was definitely an anxiety producing type of activity that I would do.
Yeah.
I've just learned to set that aside, really just try to be in the moment and not be trying to figure out what somebody is thinking or feeling about what I'm saying, but just to expect that if I have offended them, then they're gonna let me know, and not
Mhm.
to be so uh, I don't even know what the word is right now, but just constantly concerned.
Yeah. Yes. Always scanning for threat in the other
Mhm.
person. And if somehow I think that if we can predict it and we think we know what they're thinking about us,
Right,
then that for some reason feels like it protects us.
right,
And because then we can shapeshift and we can become what
exactly.
they want us to become. And
Right.
then we lose who God created us to be, and we morph into what makes other people happy. And then we feel quote unquote safe, except for that we were hyper vigilant the whole time we were in that relationship with that person.
Right. And our body just lets us know that that is not a healthy way to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
in that sense, like I am thankful for the times that my body does talk to me now. When I do fall into those people pleasing, I'll start to feel that
Mhm.
tension that's reminiscent of the tension that leads to a lot of chronic pain and be like,
Right.
oh, I see what I'm doing here. I'm scanning, or I'm assuming that they are judging me, or that they hate me, or they think this, that, and the other thing about me.
Right.
I think it is worth noting for people listening that there are times that that threat detector is right, but um, but most of the time it's not. And so the question we have to do, or what we have to do, is to really think with our thinking brain: is it true? Am I in danger in this relationship right now?
Yeah.
Is this person's intention actually to hurt me? And if that's only just a part of you that's feeling that way, opposed to like your God-given peace that passes understanding and protects your heart, then that might be worth noting. Okay,
Right. Right.
is there a different energy that I can live
And
out right now?
I think that also can lead us into deeper healing. When we're able to recognize, well, where did that come from? Why do I feel threatened?
Mm-hmm.
And we're able to take that before the Lord. And oftentimes, and when I'm journaling, a memory will come up, and it makes perfect sense why I am having this anxiety. I did have a situation that was hard and scary and hurtful.
Yep.
And so when we can take that before the Lord and say, okay, Lord, I know you don't want me to continue to walk in this way of fear. And so I'm going to put this before you, and I'm going to ask for your healing. And it's been amazing how God has healed my heart. And I'm sure our listeners as well. I'd love to hear their stories as well of
Mhm.
how the Lord has healed their hearts from previous situations because of understanding this connection between the brain and the body.
Yeah. Yes, there's just something about doing this work that validates our past experience,
Mhm.
that frees us to be empowered in these moments to say that was my past. God's redeemed that and healed me from the label or the identity that I took from that, and to
Right.
move on empowerment. And I think that's something that's important to note, that you bring up, that there's no shame in this. There's no shame in that we have pain because we're people pleasing, because when we start to realize where the genesis of it is, there's normally hurt we're carrying, and the Lord wants to redeem that and empower us to move forward in His freedom, instead of in this threat detecting physiology stance that like faces forward all the time when we're in chronic pain. Oh my
I
gosh.
just have to say amen. Amen.
Yes. Okay. The next one is uncertainty in life, and how we can become self-protective, or in fear of uncertainty. And so I think this is such a good one. Ready, set, go. It's yours.
Well, there is so much uncertainty.
Yeah.
We can't possibly predict everything that's going to happen in our lives. And I think we get into a game of what if and what if and what if, and we try to protect. Well,
Yeah.
what if this happens? Then I gotta make sure that this thing is taken care of. And yes, there's some wisdom being prepared, right? We should be prepared for our lives, but at the same time, if we are continually in that what if mode
Mm.
and we can't get out of it, and it causes anxiety before us, that is not, I don't believe that that is the way that God would have us live. He wants us to bring those burdens to Him. And He said we are going to have trouble in life. What John 16:33 talks about the fact that, Jesus said we are going to have trouble in this life, but He has overcome. And so we can rest and lean into His strength and His ability to lay those things before Him, pray, through those things, and not let them be something that continually holds back, and keeps us in fear.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I remember it at one point in time making a very vague statement to myself that um, it was safe to be uncertain. It is okay
mhm,
to be unsure. I do not have to know everything. I get to just trust and allow that God has me and He has this situation that I can't figure out, because we know that overthinking, figuring out that catastrophizing way of operating in life, which is really kind of what we're talking about so far in all three of these categories, is catastrophizing. It's just
mhm.
not helpful for our brain or our bodies, and really does send us into just a ton of tension. So yes, so that uncertainty is something that I think we all have to wrestle with, because God doesn't give us the solid yes, this is right, and no, this is wrong way of black and white thinking throughout life. He allows us to sit back and trust in Him sometimes in the unknown. Ugh, it's tough for sure.
Definitely. Well, and I mean, parenting, goodness
Mm,
sakes, talk about not not knowing what to expect. I
yeah,
mean, I love the phrase that boiling water can either soften a carrot or harden an egg.
yeah.
You know, I've used that a lot when it comes to parenting, because every kid is different.
Mm,
And sometimes we just have to be okay with realizing we don't know what we don't know,
yeah.
but we're going to learn, and being willing to be open to learning and bringing it before the Lord again. This is all about our relationship with the Lord. Is, you know, Lord, this kid is driving me crazy, and what do I do? And it's been amazing how I have four kids, and every single one of them is different. I mean, I even have twins, and they are different. Um, so it's continually coming before the Lord and saying, I don't know. I don't have the answers, but I know you do. I know you love this kid more than me, even, and you're gonna guide me through this, and you're gonna guide them as well.
What is that like for your body to go from that feeling the need to know and be able to, parent very specifically to each child, to go from that kind of stressful. I see. I can't even talk about parenting kids because I don't have any. But that hypervigilance of having to meet your kids exactly where they are and be the perfect mom for them, to go
Mhm.
from that to trusting God. How do you feel like your body responds to that difference?
Honestly, so much more peaceful. I mean, our whole home is so much more peaceful, and
Mm.
and fun. I mean, we laugh so much more because we realize we don't know the answers, and sometimes we do silly things and we have to learn from them. Um, and so and when it comes to my body, I definitely know that the tension is not there anymore to be a perfect parent.
Yeah.
I do my best, and then I have to ask for forgiveness when I make a mistake. And thankfully, my kids have been very gracious toward me, and I think that it's a good example too to go before them and say, I said this thing, and that wasn't right, or I was angry at that time, and that wasn't your fault. And when I do that, I feel like it's a really good example for them to be able to make mistakes too, that they don't have to be perfect you know
Yeah. When you say you laughed more, do you mean you and your husband, or do you mean with your kids?
I mean, the whole family, we
Yeah.
just laugh a lot more. When mom is not super freaked out, there's just a lightness in our home that I've really enjoyed, and I think that the kids have appreciated that too, and they feel lighter. So it's just been an incredible experience all the way around.
So, okay, so far we've talked about three categories, and I just want to clarify. So with pain, we are, instead of expecting there to be pain, we are expecting there to be no pain. We are
Yes.
expecting to begin to heal. Um, and we know that that takes a while for the brain to change neural circuits and to rewire itself. Um,
Right.
but we're expecting for the pain to go away. When it
Hmm.
comes to people, the second category, we are expecting the best of them instead of expecting that they're echoing a relationship we had in our past.
Right.
I also, in that category, remember expecting that my body would not always believe. So if I was around people that I felt with my thinking brain were manipulative or judgmental, I
Hmm.
remember thinking, I'm going to expect that I'm not going to believe things that are false about me. So both expecting the best of other people and also expecting that I could ground myself in Christ. And if it was ill intent on the other part, I did not have to choose to accept that label.
Right.
And with the
And that you could handle it.
yeah, I would be okay. My body didn't have to brace when those things would happen. I could soften my bracing and kind of say, okay, Lord, what do you want me to believe about myself in this scenario?
Right.
And then the third one we're at is uncertainty in life. Basically the fact that you're not always going to know the right answer. So would you say that as far as parenting goes, that you almost flipped the script on yourself and started expecting that you wouldn't know. There wouldn't be certainty.
Yes, and there was so much peace in
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Such, I would say just a freedom to live, you
Yeah.
know, and then having the blessing of no pain has just increased our enjoyment in life, you know.
Yeah. But I just want to tag on to that. I'm curious if we have the same experience. For me, the pain was actually the last thing to change for me. I started changing my expectations around people and things like certainty, and other categories. And as I began to do that, that was when that expecting the pain to reverse
Mm.
um, had its big moment, I guess, was after I started doing some of this emotional work. Do you feel that way, or was it the other way around for you?
I think it was a little combination of both.
Okay.
I think I got some real traction when I actually didn't have pain, when I typically
Mm.
had been having pain. Just, doing a walk around my neighborhood would cause me pain. And when I started being able to do those walks with no pain, it was very encouraging.
Yeah.
Um, and then as I started, I didn't do as much of the emotional work until I started working with you. So
Mm.
I think it was more of a pain
Mm.
reprocessing therapy to begin with for me.
Okay.
And then I kind of hit a plateau where I still was having pain in my shoulder. And that's when I started working with you, and we started working with looking at those emotional pieces and getting that healing. And that's what really, you know, kind of set me on the other side of pain and symptoms.
Okay. Okay. Cool. So everybody might have a little bit of a different story on the chicken before the egg or the egg before the
Right.
chicken. Okay. And then we have one last category, and
Mm-hmm.
that is actually probably my personal favorite category. um, and that is self-protection from self,
Mm-hmm.
from our own inner dialogue, the ways that we feel valuable or um, helpless, those types of things, the way that our language either builds us up or tears us down. And for me, that was a big part of the tension I held in my body, is that I literally had to protect myself from my own voice. And so allowing God to come in and redeem that for me was just a big part of my story, and makes living in my brain actually a safe place that I enjoy being. So novel. Um, what are your um, what are your thoughts
Oh,
around that category?
um, I just I've realized that I can expect the best of myself, but in a loving way. So I want to unpack that just a little bit
Yeah.
because um, I used to expect the best of myself, but in a very self-critical way. And so I was continually thinking, well, why did I do, I just would beat myself up, why did I do it that way? And what was wrong with me? What was I thinking? And I
Mhm.
just get all worked up.
Yeah.
What I've learned is I can expect the best of myself, but in a loving way. And so I want to unpack that just a little bit because we can expect ourselves, but I used to be so super critical. Every little mistake I made, I would just be so upset with myself. And I think that
Mm.
I felt like I was being accountable, right? It
Mm.
it seemed like the smart thing to do and the biblical thing, right? We should be accountable for our actions. But what I found is that I was causing so much because I was continually uh,
You said we lost you there. So I think when it blanked out, you said there was so much tension in your body.
there was so much tension in my body. And what I found is that I could be lighter with myself as well.
Mhm.
That it wasn't just with my kids, but also with myself, that I didn't have to uh, just continually be questioning, why did I do that? And what was I thinking? That I just had a love for myself that said, it's okay. You made a mistake. It's okay. It's, we're going to work through it. We're going to learn from this. And so, I think I learned really about my inner dialogue with one of your exercises, that it just was very eye-opening to how negative I was toward myself. And so as I started thinking about that and how it did not line up with the way that God thinks about me, that is when I started really changing, that inner dialogue.
Yeah. I think sometimes we can mislabel that as like humble. We're being
Mhm.
humble by putting ourselves down. And
Right.
it's not, I've thought about this quite a bit because I appreciate that you said something along the lines of loving yourself, or is that the
Hmm.
exact language you used? Yeah. And
Hmm.
that can be really confusing and off-putting for people. And we kind of
Right.
we actually kind of brace sometimes when we hear that. We're like, wait, what? We don't do that as Christians. And yet God is just really clear that he does love us, and he loves the parts of us that are not so pretty either. And he
Mhm.
doesn't come in and say, wow, that part of you is not so pretty. He pulls us in with his love and helps to encourage us and redeem and allow freedom in those areas
Yeah.
that lets go of that derogatory voice. Because that it's interesting, because that derogatory voice that we have falsely labeled as humble actually puts a lot of responsibility on other people to lift us up and to encourage us. We
Mhm.
now expect somebody to come back and say, oh, no, you're great, you
Mm.
shouldn't this, you shouldn't think like that. And all of a sudden they're carrying this burden that we thought was honoring to God. And I don't know about you, but I just felt yucky all the time
Mhm.
about myself, and instead allowing God's love for me to show that grace and that love to myself
Right.
in those moments. Is I know you well enough to know that that's what you're saying about
That's exactly.
yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Thank
And
you for
it is
holding that.
it was tricky. It was something that I had to work through because I definitely grew up with the idea that self-love was not right.
Yeah.
But I think that there in all of these things, there's this area that we need to, go before the Lord and say, what do you say? And if what I'm saying about myself doesn't line up with what you say, then I don't want to think that way anymore because it's not helpful for me and it's
Yeah.
not helpful for my body. And so coming to that understanding was really a key to my healing.
And choosing to believe what he says about me.
Mm-hmm.
Also, for me, redeemed my relationship with him.
Right.
It allowed him to be safe, I'm going to say, and loving, and somebody that I wanted to be in relationship with because I could trust. He wasn't somebody that wanted me to tear myself down and rip myself up and chew myself and throw it out, that idiom. He wasn't
Yes.
like that. And that, when we are in relationship with God and he is safe and loving, it is completely different for me than a relationship with a God that I'm terrified of.
Right. Well, and I think that part of that protecting yourself is actually like trying to keep yourself from needing to be corrected.
Yeah.
But we can trust in a loving God that knows us so deeply that he knows what's going to hurt us. He knows, is this going to boil, soften the carrot, or is this going to harden the egg? He
Mm-hmm.
knows the inner workings of us. And so he knows how to correct us in a way that is going to be loving, but also going to be clear, you know.
It's interesting because before we started this conversation, we prayed that the God's words would come out of our mouth, whether we had planned to talk about something or not. And I'm kind of seeing this fifth category as self-protection. And I know not everybody has this story, but I did, where I was in relationship with a God that I was kind of scared of, and
Mhm.
not in like the fear awe type way that is the biblical way we're meant to be in this healthy relationship with him.
Right.
But so if we feel like we have to be predicting that God is going to be angry with me all the time for every single little error, I'm not even sin, yes, but even errors, then
Or just not being good enough.
we're not being good enough. Yeah, that that really does play out in prediction of fear and constantly on hyper vigilant edge of every single action that we take. And so when we can flip that and see God's grace and see his love and see his freedom and how he sees us, and
Yes.
um begin to allow that to have a home in our souls, that
Hmm.
um that changes our physiology, it changes our pain, it changes our threat level,
Yes.
um, cortisol, it changes it all. So I'm
Hmm.
thankful to him for that. Yeah. Okay. Well, that was our 5 categories, since I added one to the end. Do you have anything else you want to talk about? We wanted to talk about expectation and predicting and flipping the script on those things.
Hmm.
Um, we definitely wanted to talk about the verse Philippians 4:6-7. We can then expect peace that surpasses all understanding to guard our hearts and our minds.
Right. And we should point out the beginning of that verse, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's read the whole thing. Let's see. Philippians 4, 6, and 7. Okay, I got my Bible. Oh, you can't see it. It's all blurry. But it says, do not be anxious about anything, because we don't have to be. That's my little parentheses, because we don't have to be. But in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests before the Lord. And here's the awesome verse. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. Anything else you want to add?
I think we covered it today.
Okay. I want to add something that you said. I'm going to quote you.
Mm,
You said, no, that's not it. Where is it? You said what we expect to happen to us directs our brain's focus. And then I said that focus guides either threat or peace, which
mhm.
leads to our experience. Okay. On that note, we just want to encourage you guys to keep doing the emotional work,
Mm-hmm.
understanding how and why your brain is predicting these negative outcomes, and ask the Lord if there is a way to find redemption so that you can start to expect his peace to be protective for your hearts and your minds.
Amen. Amen.
All right. That's all we have for today. Thanks, you guys. Thanks for being here. And I'll see you next week. Thank you, Jen, for showing up, being you, and bringing all your wisdom. It's super helpful to me, and I know to all the listeners.
Always a privilege.
All right. Bye.
Your face.